It was a mistake that would change everything. A simple misstep. A wrong turn down the hallway. And yet, it was a moment that would alter the course of two lives forever. A young woman, fresh out of college and unsure of what her future held, stepped into what she thought was a conference room. But it wasn't. It was the CEO's office. He was a powerful man, known by everyone in the company, admired and feared by his employees. And there she stood, nervous, her heart racing, wondering how to excuse herself. But before she could speak, he'd already made his move. What happened next was a blur, a mix of uncertainty, heated moments, and undeniable attraction. One mistake turned into an unforgettable night. The girl couldn't have predicted it. Neither could he. The CEO, used to control, used to having the upper hand, now found himself tangled in a situation that neither of them had planned for. Days passed. The girl tried to forget it. She couldn't. The unexpected twist came when she found out she was pregnant. Not just with one child, but twins. The news hit her like a thunderstorm, and soon, it hit him too. The CEO, known for his cold, calculated decisions, suddenly had to make one of the hardest decisions of his life. He proposed to her. Why? Why would he propose to someone who had just walked into his office by accident? What could have possibly prompted such an offer? And for her, what was she supposed to do? She had always dreamed of a different life, one full of independence and freedom. Now, she had to choose between following her own dreams or accepting a proposal from the most powerful man she had ever met. The tension in the air was thick. The question hung between them: could a single mistake change the trajectory of their lives forever? The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and confusion for the young woman, whose name was Anna. She had never imagined herself in a situation like this. A chance meeting in the CEO's office, and now she found herself pregnant with twins and facing a proposal from a man she barely knew. She hadn't even been aware of the CEO's personal life, or that he had been watching her closely that night. She was just a young, unremarkable woman in his eyes, but now she was tangled in a mess she never anticipated. Anna's world felt like it was spinning. She had grown up in a modest household, worked hard to earn a spot in the prestigious company, and was just starting to build a life of her own. But now, everything had changed in the blink of an eye. She had twins on the way, and with them, the pressure of a decision she hadn't planned for. Should she accept the proposal and let him take care of everything, or should she go it alone? The idea of relying on him was terrifying, and yet, the weight of the situation pressed her to consider it. The CEO, Nathaniel Hayes, had no idea how to navigate this situation either. His sharp business mind was useless when it came to matters of the heart. His reputation was built on control and decisiveness, but in Anna's case, he felt powerless. They had both made a mistake, but it was a mistake that had complicated their lives in ways neither of them had foreseen. Nathaniel had always kept his personal life private, too focused on his career to entertain distractions. But something about Anna, the innocence in her eyes, the way she stood there uncertain, appealed to something deep inside him. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was the responsibility he felt after their night together. But there was something else too, something he couldn't quite place. She wasn't like the others he had encountered in his world of business meetings and power struggles. Anna wasn't interested in his money, his status, or his fame. She was just real. He saw her more than just the woman he had spent one night with. He saw a future he hadn't expected. He needed to fix the mistake. And what better way to fix it than offering her the security of marriage? But was it the right thing to do? Nathaniel was too proud to admit it, but his offer wasn't just about fixing the situation, it was about the budding emotions he was starting to feel for her. As the days passed, the conversation between them remained awkward and strained. He sent her flowers, emails, and made sure she had the best medical care. But all of it felt like a business transaction rather than an emotional connection. Anna felt the weight of it every time she saw him in the office. It wasn't just the pregnancy, it was the realization that this wasn't just about two people. This was about public perception, about his reputation, about a world she didn't understand. Anna couldn't help but question his intentions. Was he offering marriage out of a sense of duty? Or was he truly trying to build a life with her? She tried to look past his CEO persona, but every time she looked at him, she saw a man who had it all, and yet, nothing seemed to satisfy him. He was a man who had everything, and yet, here he was offering her a part of it. She felt conflicted. Could she accept a life built on a proposal born out of guilt, or could there be more to this than she was seeing? Despite their differing backgrounds and conflicting emotions, something unspoken began to grow between them. Late-night conversations, tentative touches, and quiet moments shared in the silence of his office after hours made them realize that maybe, just maybe, they weren't so different after all. Nathaniel was driven by ambition and success, but Anna saw past that. She saw a man who was carrying more weight on his shoulders than he was willing to admit. And for Nathaniel, he saw in Anna someone who wasn't blinded by his wealth or status, someone who could see him for who he truly was, not just the powerful CEO the world revered. But even as they began to form an unspoken connection, the doubts continued to cloud their minds. Nathaniel couldn't shake the fear that this was all a mistake. He didn't need a family, he didn't need the responsibility. Anna, on the other hand, didn't want to be a pawn in his world of luxury and business deals. She didn't want to be swept up in a proposal that might not be genuine. Despite the unease, they both knew something had shifted. The bond between them wasn't just about the twins, it was about understanding, trust, and an unexpected connection neither of them had anticipated. But the questions lingered. Was it enough to build a future on? Or were they both just grasping at the possibility of something more, something that was never meant to be? Anna sat in her small apartment that evening, staring out the window at the city lights. The quiet hum of the traffic below seemed miles away from the turmoil in her mind. The proposal, the one she had been wrestling with, kept playing over and over in her thoughts. Nathaniel's words echoed in her ears, "Marry me. Let me take care of everything." The words were simple, but their weight felt like an anchor around her chest. She had never envisioned a life like this. Her dream was to build something on her own, to stand independent, to make her way in the world without relying on anyone, especially not someone like him. Nathaniel Hayes, the powerful CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, had everything. He had success, wealth, influence. The world seemed to revolve around him, and yet, here he was, standing in front of her, offering her a life she never wanted. But was it really about what she wanted? She wasn't sure. The idea of having twins was overwhelming enough. But then, the prospect of a marriage, especially to him, seemed even more daunting. Anna had never been one to shy away from responsibility, but this felt like a different kind of burden. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself to make a decision that wouldn't haunt her forever? Meanwhile, Nathaniel was facing his own set of struggles. The cold, calculated businessman who had spent his life avoiding emotional entanglements found himself falling into a situation he couldn't control. He had made the offer out of a sense of duty, perhaps even guilt. But as the days passed, he realized something deeper was at play. It wasn't just about doing the right thing, it was about wanting her. He had seen Anna at her most vulnerable, and somehow, that had broken through the barriers he had spent years building. She wasn't like the women he was used to. She didn't look at him with admiration for his status or wealth. She didn't try to manipulate him into getting something out of him. Instead, she had challenged him to question everything he had believed about relationships and what it meant to be truly seen. But despite his growing feelings for her, Nathaniel knew that proposing wasn't a simple solution. He wasn't just offering marriage to ease his conscience, he was offering a part of himself. Could he truly commit to someone like Anna? Someone who had a life of her own, a future she wasn't willing to compromise? He didn't know. But one thing was clear, he couldn't let her walk away without at least trying. So, one evening, he sat in his office, nervously staring at the invitation to dinner he had just sent her. This wasn't just about a meal. It was his way of bringing her closer to him, to show her that he wasn't just the man who had made a mistake. He was a man who wanted to make things right. When Anna arrived, she was quieter than usual. Her eyes held a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. Nathaniel stood to greet her, a soft smile playing on his lips, but even he could feel the tension between them. They sat down at the large dining table, surrounded by the soft glow of candles and the quiet rhythm of the evening. The meal passed in a blur, but Nathaniel noticed her eyes shifting, avoiding his gaze. "Anna," Nathaniel finally spoke, his voice low and sincere, "I need you to understand that this offer isn't just about what happened. I don't expect you to think this is easy. I know it isn't. But I'm asking you to consider this because I believe we could make something of it. Something real." Anna felt her heart skip a beat. He sounded so genuine, so vulnerable. But was he? She could sense the weight in his words, but what if this was just a temporary fix? What if he was trying to patch up a problem that wasn't even his to fix? "You want me to marry you, because I'm carrying your child?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, the question hanging between them like a fragile thread. Nathaniel hesitated, his gaze softening. "No. I want you to marry me because I can't imagine this being any other way. You and I, we've both made mistakes. But I'm not going to sit back and watch you struggle alone. If you'll allow me, I want to be there for you. Not just for the babies, but for you." Anna took a deep breath. She wasn't sure if she was ready to make that kind of leap, but the sincerity in his eyes was hard to ignore. She had never expected any of this to happen. And yet, here she was, staring down a future that she couldn't even fathom a few weeks ago. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, looking up at him, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't owe me anything." But, her words trailed off as she looked into his eyes, seeing something more than just a man offering a marriage contract. She saw someone who, despite his wealth and power, was afraid of the very thing he was offering. Nathaniel reached across the table, gently taking her hand. "I know you think I'm just making this up as I go along. Maybe I am. But I've never wanted to be with anyone like I want to be with you. And I'm asking you, Anna, will you marry me?" The room seemed to freeze as she stared at him, unsure of what to say. But inside, a part of her already knew the answer. She didn't just want security. She wanted love, understanding, and a future that was hers, whether it was with him or not. And yet, she realized she was already halfway there, caught in the tension of something that might just be more than either of them expected. The days following Nathaniel's proposal felt like a whirlwind. Anna tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to the moment in his office, when he had laid everything out so simply. He wasn't just offering a marriage, he was offering a future. A future she never imagined, a future filled with uncertainties, questions, and new responsibilities. Anna couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that this wasn't just about the twins. Yes, they were a part of it, but this proposal seemed to carry so much more weight, too much weight. Was it love? Or was it a sense of duty? Was Nathaniel's offer a genuine desire to build a family, or was he just trying to fix a mistake, one that he could never erase? She sat on the edge of her bed that evening, her hands trembling as she picked up the letter from her doctor. The results of her ultrasound had confirmed it, twins. 2 little lives growing inside of her. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but the thought of doing it alone was just as terrifying. Could she rely on Nathaniel? Or was she better off facing the world by herself, without him? Across the city, Nathaniel sat in his high-rise apartment, looking out over the skyline. His fingers tapped the edge of his glass, his mind swirling with the same doubts that had haunted him for days. He had never been one to second-guess himself. In business, he made decisions swiftly, without hesitation. But this? This wasn't business. This was personal, and every part of him wanted to retreat into the comfort of his familiar, cold world. He had been upfront with Anna about everything, his intentions, his feelings. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized just how little he knew about her. She was from a completely different world, one filled with values and principles that didn't align with his. Her independence was a part of her identity, and he feared that his proposal would feel like a trap to her, a cage she'd never wanted to be in. But there was something else, a deeper fear he couldn't ignore. He was terrified of opening his heart to someone. His past had taught him that love was a dangerous game. His mother had left when he was young, his father had been distant, and his relationships with others had always felt like transactions, not connections. Anna was the first person in a long time who made him feel seen, not just for his money or status, but for who he truly was. And that terrified him more than he cared to admit. Despite their differences, the connection between Anna and Nathaniel had grown in ways neither of them had anticipated. Every glance, every moment of silence, spoke volumes. He had become increasingly aware of how much he was falling for her, but he couldn't let himself admit it, not yet. What if this was just a fleeting emotion, something that would fade as quickly as it had come? What if it wasn't enough to build a future on? Anna's struggle was just as real, just as intense. She didn't want to rely on Nathaniel, but the thought of raising twins on her own, without the safety net of his wealth and influence, felt impossible. She had always been independent, always worked for everything she had, but the future she was facing now was much more daunting than anything she had ever prepared for. Her friends and family had weighed in, each offering their own opinions, but it only made the decision harder. Her mother had raised her to be strong, to never depend on anyone, especially a man. But the more Anna thought about it, the more she realized how much she had already depended on Nathaniel. He had been there for her since the moment she had told him about the pregnancy. He had provided medical care, made sure she was taken care of, and even insisted on accompanying her to her appointments. Yet, it still wasn't enough to convince her to accept his proposal. There were too many unanswered questions. Was he offering marriage because he truly wanted to be with her, or because it was the only way to save face in front of his business associates? Would he be able to provide the love and commitment she needed, or would he retreat into his old ways, keeping her at arm's length? She couldn't deny that there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when she felt something for him. There were times when he looked at her, not with the detached eyes of a CEO, but with a look of tenderness, a softness that she had never expected. But that wasn't enough. She couldn't marry someone just because they were kind to her. She needed to know that he was capable of giving her more than that, more than just his money or his promises. Her internal battle raged on, and every time she saw Nathaniel, the questions grew louder. Was he truly the man he appeared to be, or was he just another part of her past, something she needed to leave behind in order to move forward? Nathaniel, for his part, was struggling with the same doubts. He couldn't escape the fear that, despite everything he had offered, Anna would see through him. That she would realize that his offer wasn't just a proposal, it was a plea for something more. But what if he was asking for something that he wasn't ready to give himself? As the days went on, the tension between them grew. It wasn't just the pregnancy, it was everything that came with it. The unspoken expectations, the fears, the walls they had both built around their hearts. They were two people standing on the edge of something beautiful, yet terrifying, and neither of them knew how to take the next step. The days were growing longer, the weight of the decision hanging over Anna's every move. She had spent so many sleepless nights tossing and turning, trying to find the right answer, trying to understand her heart. The proposal from Nathaniel wasn't just an offer, it was a challenge to her entire worldview. She had always prided herself on her independence, on her ability to stand on her own 2 feet. But now, with twins on the way and a future she couldn't predict, everything felt uncertain. She found herself alone in the quiet of her apartment one evening, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands as she stared out the window. The city lights blurred, her mind consumed by the choices ahead. Marrying Nathaniel would bring security, a life full of comforts, opportunities, and a future for her children. But what about her own dreams? Her own path? Could she sacrifice everything she had worked for, everything she had built, for the promise of a future with him? The idea of marrying him out of obligation, out of guilt, made her stomach turn. She didn't want to be a charity case, a woman carried away by the force of his wealth and status. And yet, as she looked at the small baby clothes she had purchased for her twins, the reality of her situation hit her harder than ever. She was carrying 2 lives inside her. She couldn't do this alone. Could she? Nathaniel was in the office late again, his mind buzzing with thoughts of Anna. He had done everything to make sure she knew how serious he was, how deeply he cared about her and the babies. But he couldn't escape the feeling that something was missing. There was a distance between them that no amount of gestures, no amount of gifts, could close. Every time he saw her, there was a hesitance in her eyes, a wall he couldn't break through. He had been raised to believe that relationships were transactional, either they worked or they didn't, but nothing in life came without a price. But with Anna, everything was different. She wasn't like the women he had known. She didn't want his money. She didn't want his status. She wanted something real, something he wasn't sure he could give. He wasn't sure if he could offer her the love and commitment she needed. And yet, the thought of losing her, the thought of her walking away, was unbearable. It was then that he received a call from his lawyer, reminding him about the upcoming family event. He was expected to attend, to present a flawless image to his colleagues and peers. But as he stood at his office window, staring out over the city, he couldn't help but feel a growing unease. The world he had worked so hard to build, his carefully curated image, was about to be shattered. He had been afraid of this moment for years, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of the unpredictability of life. But now, with Anna and the twins on the horizon, he couldn't keep running from it. He knew he had to make a choice. The question was he ready to make it? As Anna prepared for the next day's appointment, she received a message from Nathaniel. It was short, direct, but the weight of it was unmistakable. "I need to talk to you." She stared at the message for a long moment, the knot in her stomach tightening. She had hoped for some sign, something to tell her what she should do. But what if this was the moment where everything changed? What if he finally admitted that this was too much, too soon for him, and that he was ready to walk away? The idea made her heart ache, but in some twisted way, part of her was relieved. She wasn't sure she could handle the pressure of it all anymore. Yet, when she stood in front of Nathaniel later that evening, standing in his office as the city lights flickered outside the window, something shifted. The room was quiet, the tension palpable between them. He didn't speak at first, only watched her, his gaze filled with uncertainty. Finally, it was Anna who broke the silence. "I'm not sure what you want from me," she said softly, her voice betraying the anxiety that had been swirling in her chest. "I don't know if I can do this, Nathaniel. I don't know if I can marry you just because you feel like it's the right thing to do." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening for a moment as he stepped closer to her. "It's not just about doing the right thing. It's about making a choice. About building something together. But can we really build something, Nathaniel? Can we really be what each other needs?" Her voice cracked, the weight of the question hanging between them. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his thumb brushing against her skin. "I don't know what the future holds, Anna. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give this everything I have." Anna stared at him, her heart pounding. She had never expected to find herself in this position, caught between what she wanted and what she needed. The reality of raising twins alone, of navigating life without him, was daunting. But was marrying him the right choice? Was it possible that love, real love, could blossom from this strange, unexpected beginning? For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to look at him, not as a CEO, not as a man offering a proposal, but as a person. A person who, despite all his faults, was offering her a chance at a future together. But was it enough? Nathaniel's eyes searched hers, as if asking her to see the truth in him. "What do you need, Anna?" he asked softly. The silence in the room was deafening as she wrestled with her heart. The decision she was about to make would change everything. But what if this was the moment where love began to replace fear? The following days were filled with a quiet kind of tension, as if both Anna and Nathaniel were waiting for something, an answer, a sign, something that would tell them they were on the right path. But life, as it often does, didn't offer the clarity they both sought. Instead, it tested them, pushing them toward the truth they were too afraid to face. For Anna, the choice remained agonizing. Every time she looked at Nathaniel, she saw the man who had offered her everything: security, a life she never could have imagined for herself, and, in a way, a future for her children. But she also saw a man who had spent his life avoiding vulnerability, someone who wasn't used to being challenged, someone who feared being let down. Could she trust him? Could she rely on him to be the partner she needed, not just for the twins, but for herself? Her heart was torn. She had dreamed of a different life, a life she could control, a life where she didn't have to depend on anyone. But the reality of the situation was clear. She wasn't just facing the uncertainty of raising twins alone. She was facing the possibility of being alone, completely alone, with no one to help her. Nathaniel's proposal had been her lifeline, but could she accept it without losing herself in the process? Nathaniel, too, was struggling with the weight of his feelings. He had spent most of his life keeping his emotions at bay, focusing solely on his career, on his image as the powerful CEO. But Anna had changed that. She had broken through his walls in a way no one else had. The fear he had buried deep within him, the fear of being vulnerable, of letting someone in, was now coming to the surface. And it terrified him. For so long, he had believed that success was everything. That control was everything. But Anna had made him realize that without love, without connection, everything else was meaningless. He wanted her. He didn't just want to fix the situation, to save face for the press. He wanted to build something with her, something real. But the fear of rejection, the fear of opening his heart to someone who might not want him the way he wanted her, kept him from being fully open. It wasn't until one quiet afternoon, when they were both in the office, that the breakthrough came. Anna had come to discuss the twins' upcoming checkup, and Nathaniel had asked her to stay afterward. As the meeting came to an end, she lingered near the door, ready to leave, her mind elsewhere. But then Nathaniel spoke, his voice more vulnerable than she had ever heard it before. "Anna," he began, his tone quiet, almost hesitant. "I need to say something. Something that I've been holding back." Anna turned, her heart skipping a beat. There was something different in his voice, something she hadn't heard before, something raw, something real. She crossed the room and stood before him, waiting for him to continue. "I know I've kept a lot of walls up," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "And I know that's part of why you don't trust me fully. But I need you to know that what I'm offering you isn't just a solution to a problem. It's not just a business deal. It's me, Anna. It's me being honest. I'm asking you to marry me because I don't want to live my life without you in it. I've spent so many years building this empire, this world, and it's never felt real, never felt like it meant anything, until I met you. And now, I can't imagine my future without you and those babies in it." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with the sincerity that both terrified and comforted Anna. She had never seen him so open, so raw. The walls he had so carefully built up were coming down, and in their place was something new, something she hadn't expected. Nathaniel Hayes, the man who had seemed so untouchable, was now standing before her, vulnerable and unguarded. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she processed what he was saying. She had never expected this. She had expected more of the same, more of the cold, calculated decisions he was known for. But this? This was different. He wasn't offering her a life of luxury or status. He was offering her his heart. And for the first time, Anna felt the weight of his words sink in. She swallowed hard, her emotions rising to the surface. Nathaniel, I don't know what to say. Her voice trembled, betraying the turmoil inside her. I've been so afraid. Afraid that you weren't being honest, that this was all just a way for you to fix things. But now I don't know what to think. You're not the man I thought you were, and that terrifies me. Nathaniel stepped closer to her, his gaze unwavering. I understand. And I don't expect you to trust me overnight. But I'm here, Anna. I'm here for you, for whatever you decide. But just know this, I want to build a life with you. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the only thing I want to do. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Anna looked into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the same fear that she had once carried. It was raw. It was real. And for the first time in a long while, she realized she wasn't alone in this. I don't have all the answers, she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. But I'm willing to try. To try with you. Nathaniel's face softened, his relief palpable. Thank you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. That's all I need. They stood there, in the quiet of the room, the weight of their shared decision hanging between them. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the easy solution. But it was a choice. A choice to face the future together, despite the uncertainties. As Anna looked at Nathaniel, she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, love could grow from the most unexpected places. And in that moment, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. In the days that followed Nathaniel's confession, Anna felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. There was still uncertainty, a hesitation that she couldn't quite shake, but there was also something else, a spark of hope. Nathaniel had finally opened up to her in a way he never had before, and it had made all the difference. The walls he had so carefully built around himself were coming down, and with each passing moment, she saw him in a new light. But even as the possibility of a future together began to feel real, the past still lingered in the shadows, threatening to pull them back into the unknown. Nathaniel had always kept his personal life guarded. To most, he was a brilliant, successful CEO, untouchable, composed, never allowing anyone to see beyond the facade. But in the weeks following their emotional breakthrough, Anna began to notice subtle cracks in that armor. She saw how Nathaniel would occasionally drift into silence, his thoughts far away, as though something was weighing heavily on his mind. It wasn't the same detached, calculated silence she had known before. This was different, this was vulnerability. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, Nathaniel invited Anna to dinner. She had agreed, knowing that the conversation they had started wasn't finished. He had promised to share more with her about himself, about his past. For Anna, the thought of hearing more of Nathaniel's story was both intriguing and daunting. She had already seen glimpses of his true self, but what lay beyond that? What secrets did he still keep hidden? They sat at a quiet corner table in a restaurant that Nathaniel had chosen, the dim lighting casting soft shadows across his face. Anna could sense that he was hesitant, unsure of how to begin. His usual confidence was replaced with something more uncertain. She reached across the table, taking his hand gently, offering him a silent reassurance. Nathaniel, she said softly, I know this isn't easy for you. But you don't have to hide from me. I'm not going anywhere. He looked at her, his eyes softening, and for a moment, he seemed to wrestle with his thoughts. Then, with a deep breath, he began. I never wanted you to think I was perfect, Anna. I never wanted you to think I had it all figured out. He paused, his gaze shifting to the floor, as though he were searching for the right words. The truth is, I've been running from something for a long time. Something that I didn't want to face. Anna listened intently, her heart racing as she waited for him to continue. She could feel the weight of his words before they even left his lips. This was something deep, something that had shaped him into the man she had come to know. I've been afraid of love, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been afraid of letting anyone get close because of what happened with my parents. Anna's brow furrowed, but she stayed silent, allowing him to speak. My mother left when I was young. She just walked away. I never understood why. And my father, he wasn't around much. He was always working, always distant. I grew up feeling like I wasn't enough, like no one could love me the way I needed. So, I built this life, this business, this empire, to prove to myself that I was worth something. He looked up at her then, his eyes filled with pain. But even with all that, I've never felt truly loved. Not until I met you. Anna's heart ached for him. She had known that Nathaniel's success was driven by something deep, something personal. But hearing it from him, hearing the rawness of his vulnerability, made her realize just how much pain he had been carrying for all these years. He had hidden behind his success, his wealth, because it was the one thing that gave him control. But in doing so, he had denied himself the one thing that mattered most, connection. Anna squeezed his hand, her own heart full of compassion. Nathaniel, you're not alone in this. We all have our battles, our scars. But you don't have to carry this burden by yourself anymore. I'm here. He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude, but also with a sadness that she couldn't quite understand. I'm afraid, Anna, he whispered. I'm afraid that I won't be able to give you everything you deserve. I'm afraid that I'll let you down. Anna shook her head, her voice steady and sincere. You're already giving me everything I need. Your honesty, your vulnerability, your willingness to try, that's enough for me. We don't need to be perfect, Nathaniel. We just need to be real with each other. For the first time, Nathaniel allowed himself to believe her. He let the walls fall completely, the weight of his past lifting as Anna's words sank in. He wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But together, they could face the future, not as two people burdened by fear, but as two people learning to love each other, flaws and all. As the evening wore on, they shared more than just their stories. They shared their hopes, their dreams, their fears. And in that moment, Anna realized that the future they were building wasn't about perfection. It was about growth, about learning to trust each other, and about building a life founded on mutual respect and love. As they left the restaurant, hand in hand, Anna felt something shift inside her. The uncertainty that had plagued her for so long began to fade. Nathaniel had revealed himself to her in a way that she hadn't expected, and in return, she had shared more of herself with him. Together, they were beginning to understand that love wasn't about fixing each other or erasing the past, it was about accepting each other, scars and all, and learning to move forward together. The days following their heartfelt conversation felt like a turning point. Nathaniel and Anna had shared their fears, their doubts, and the raw truths that had been buried for so long. For the first time, they were facing each other without the protective walls that had kept them apart. There was still uncertainty, yes, but the bond between them had grown stronger, more real. Anna had been avoiding the question for weeks now, should she marry him? Should she accept his proposal and take that final step toward a future she had never imagined for herself? She had spent so much time trying to protect her independence, trying to stay in control of her own life. But the truth was, she couldn't do it alone. She couldn't face the future alone, especially with twins on the way. Nathaniel had been patient with her. He hadn't pressured her. He had given her the space to think, to make her own decision. And yet, with each passing day, the question lingered between them. Every time their eyes met, every time they shared a quiet moment, it was clear that they were both waiting for something, waiting for Anna to make a choice. The day came when Nathaniel asked her again, though this time, his voice was soft, almost tentative. They were in his office, the familiar hum of the city outside the windows. The setting felt right, quiet, peaceful, away from the distractions that had clouded their thoughts before. "Anna," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know this is a big decision. But I'm asking you again, will you marry me?" She looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of the question. She had been running from it for so long, but now it felt like it was time to face it. Time to face the reality of what their future could look like. She had always dreamed of independence, of forging her own path, but now she understood that independence didn't mean doing everything alone. It meant having the strength to accept help, to build something together, to trust someone with her heart. Her thoughts swirled around the room as she took a deep breath. She had thought about this moment so many times, each time convinced that she would have the answer. But now that the moment was here, everything felt more complicated. Nathaniel had shared his heart with her, had shown her a side of him that she hadn't known existed. She had seen his vulnerability, his fear, and she knew now that he wasn't just offering her security. He was offering her his love, his commitment, and his future. But could she accept it? Could she allow herself to trust him completely, to open her heart to a man who had been so closed off for so long? The silence between them stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Anna spoke, her voice soft but sure. "Yes," she said, her heart racing. "Yes, I'll marry you." The words felt like a weight lifting off her chest. The uncertainty, the fear, the doubts, they all began to fade as the realization settled in. She was making a choice, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. She wanted to build a life with Nathaniel. She wanted to raise their children together. She wanted to face the future with him, despite everything that had come before. Nathaniel's face lit up, a mixture of relief and joy crossing his features. He stepped forward, his hands reaching for hers, pulling her into a gentle embrace. The weight of their past, their fears, their struggles, melted away in that moment. It was just the two of them now, no more walls, no more hesitation. They had made a decision. Together. "I'm so glad," he whispered, holding her close. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Anna closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "It means a lot to me too," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I think we can do this. We'll figure it out together." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in the quiet comfort of each other's arms. Anna felt a peace settle over her, one that she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time, she realized that she didn't need to have everything figured out. She didn't need to control every aspect of her life. She just needed to trust. Trust Nathaniel. Trust their love. Trust the future they were about to build together. As they pulled apart, Nathaniel smiled, his eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and relief. "We've got this, Anna," he said, his voice full of confidence. Anna smiled back, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "Yeah, we do." The months that followed felt like a blur to Anna and Nathaniel. The pregnancy progressed, and with it, their relationship blossomed in ways they hadn't expected. What had started as an unplanned encounter, a mistake that could have torn their worlds apart, had instead become the foundation of something beautiful. They were learning to trust each other, to face their fears and uncertainties together, to embrace the future with open hearts. As Anna's due date approached, the couple found themselves preparing not just for the birth of their twins, but for the life they were about to build. They had made so many decisions in the past few months, some difficult, some simple, but all of them together. Nathaniel had learned that love was not about control, it was about vulnerability, about letting someone in, about showing up for the ones you love, no matter the cost. Anna, too, had learned that independence didn't mean doing everything alone. It meant having the strength to ask for help, to lean on someone when you needed them most. The day the twins were born was a whirlwind of emotion. The hospital room was filled with the soft sounds of baby cries, the rush of nurses, the anticipation of new life. Nathaniel was by Anna's side the entire time, holding her hand, offering words of encouragement, and never leaving her. When their twins, two healthy, beautiful babies, finally arrived, Nathaniel's heart swelled with pride, love, and a joy he hadn't known was possible. He looked at Anna, tears in his eyes as he whispered, "We did it." Anna smiled through her own tears, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "We sure did." The months that followed were filled with sleepless nights, challenges, and moments of pure joy. They found themselves navigating the chaos of parenthood together, learning to balance their careers, their responsibilities, and their growing family. There were moments of doubt, of exhaustion, but there were also moments of deep connection, the kind of moments that made it all worth it. But through it all, one thing remained constant: they had each other. The foundation they had built on trust, love, and vulnerability had become their anchor in the storm. Their bond had grown stronger than either of them had imagined. It was no longer about a man offering a proposal or a woman making a choice, it was about two people who had learned to face the world together, come what may. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, Nathaniel turned to Anna, his eyes reflecting the calm of the moment. The twins were asleep inside, and the house was quiet, save for the sounds of the wind and the distant hum of the city. It was a rare moment of peace, a moment where they could just be together. "I've learned a lot over the past year," Nathaniel said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've learned that life doesn't go the way you plan. I've learned that love isn't about having everything figured out, it's about showing up, being there for each other, no matter how messy things get. I've learned that sometimes, the most unexpected things can turn out to be the best things in your life." Anna smiled, her heart full. "I've learned the same," she replied. "I used to think I had to do everything on my own. I thought being independent meant keeping everyone at arm's length. But now I see that real strength comes from being vulnerable, from letting people in. You've shown me that." Nathaniel reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We've shown each other that," he said softly. "And we'll keep learning. Together." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their journey settling around them. There had been pain, there had been fear, but there had also been love, real, imperfect, beautiful love. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other, despite the odds, and they had built something worth fighting for. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Anna leaned her head on Nathaniel's shoulder, her heart at peace. They had made it. They had chosen each other, and together, they had built a future full of hope, love, and possibility. And in that moment, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together.